Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Mary Ann Faremouth. I should say, thrilled to have back because she's been on this podcast more than once. Because of this podcast, she started her own podcast, which I'm inherently proud of, which has done incredibly well. But we're here today to talk about your new book, Mary Ann. So, first of all, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
Marion, you have just incredible origin story and backstory up to the point where you and I met a few years ago. So could you remind our audience of your professional background?
I'm a certified personnel consultant, certified by the Board of Regents in Washington, D.C. I've been a recruiter since the early 80s. I branched out into writing books. I've got 3 nonfiction books and 5 fiction books and anthology books. And because of Tom, I have a very professional, great, successful global podcast called Career Can Do. And I also write articles for the USA Daily Post and Times every week for Kevin Price with the Price of Business show. My forte has been a recruiter, but I branched out through the years and done a lot of other things to really bring that information out to the marketplace to help people become their best self.
Yeah, and that really leads to, I think when we met, you were more involved in the recruiting side of things. And so this was right before the pandemic. So there were lots of challenges for both recruiters, companies, and for those seeking jobs. Has that role changed as we've come out of the pandemic and we're in a new sort of working model, or are you still essentially helping people in the same way?
No, that's changed. I've done a lot still in the recruiting arena. I do have a lot of clients. So my forte is mainly pipeline service, but I think my role has expanded quite a bit. And I think COVID made me, like many others, sit back and say, what do you want to do with your life? Where are you the best serviced? And I started to write. And the reason I did start to write, even before COVID, was I had a very traumatic situation. My husband, of 47 years of age, died very suddenly, and he was in the wrong job. And a good friend of mine said, for healing purposes, why don't you start writing? And so I did. And so fast forward during COVID, I took lots of writing classes, but it made me realize and think during COVID about the changes we all were going through in our personal professional lives. And so that's how this third book really came about.
Could you expand on that a little bit? By you told us a little bit why you wrote it, but who is the audience for this book, Marianne?
The audience for this book, Tom, really is anyone who wants to become their best self in their personal or professional arena. I think it's very much intertwined. All right. I think once we're in alignment with who we are, what's important to us, what really spurs our interest and our passion, if we find a position that is in alignment with that, I think our whole life becomes more fulfilling. And so COVID gave me a chance to really think about that, evaluate that. And I think that because I do write, I think I looked at things that were analogies, which might be metaphors that really have nothing to do with getting a job. And I put them all into an article that really helped people evaluate who they are, where they want to go, where they want to be.
The COVID hiatus, if I can use that phrase. In 2009, I had a catastrophic injury, which gave me the opportunity to reevaluate what I wanted to do professionally at that time. Partly because I realized if I'm going to be taken out riding a bicycle, maybe I ought to do what I want to do. This life's going to be that short. Part of it was once I got the energy to get on my walker and toddle into my office, the only thing I had on my hands was time. So I could focus on recreating myself professionally. The third thing, though, was I'd always known that if the universe closes a door, it opens one. What I didn't fully appreciate until that time was you have to have the courage to walk through it. My experience in COVID was having had that catastrophic injury. I didn't need or want to sort of reevaluate my life's purpose, but it presented an opportunity to me in the podcast arena to expand a passion business into a for-profit business. So the Compliance Podcast Network existed before COVID, but because of marketing needs for businesses during COVID, I was able to expand that. Did you talked about those people who rethought their life purpose? I've heard your story before about your husband and how that caused you to rethink that. Do you think that people rethought their life's purposes, or were there some perhaps like me that a business opportunity presented itself, and because of the preparation I'd done beforehand, I was able to accept that business challenge?
Tom, I think it's a a combination of the two. All right. I think COVID did present us with some time for reflection. But I also think during COVID, many people lost their jobs. Many companies closed. Many people were faced with some life decisions about how to go forward. And I think, as you mentioned, yours was a catastrophic injury. And I think sometimes we can look at things that happen to us in a way that, oh my God, this is horrible. But yet, what does it open up for us to do going forward? And more importantly, how can we use what's happened to us to help somebody else? And I think you've done that. I think I've done that. And I think it's about contributing to the world. I mean, my feeling is we can all be super successful, but if we don't do something with that success and help somebody else, is it really that worthwhile? For me, anyway, it means taking what you've learned, the lessons you've learned, and that's what this book is about, and contributing them to the greater good for others to learn from. Does that make any sense?
It does. What about that courage part? And I was 50 when I had that aha moment, so I wasn't a youngster. But because of COVID, did you see people willing to make changes because they had to, or because other opportunities presented themselves that they hadn't previously considered because they had to?
Yeah, I think I've heard people's stories on both sides of that, what you said. And I think people that have lost jobs were betwixt and between. What am I going to do now? What comes next? And I think that in some ways we can look at catastrophic things that happen to us as a blessing or a curse. Sometimes they are a blessing because they open up, as you said, another door. But what I've learned and what I've experienced as a recruiter were people that were coming to me and saying, this COVID thing, I lost my job, but I'm also not sure I'm in the right relationship. I'm kind of trying to reevaluate things here. And I think COVID in some ways made all of us stop in our tracks and rethink things. And I, as you said about your injury, I mean, your podcast has opened up so many doors for so many people, me included. And I think, I wonder if that had not happened to you, Tom, if you'd have this podcast, who knows? Or COVID.
If it's all the same to you, I'd still be racing bicycles. No, anyway, yeah. So let's go back to the book. You got the CEO of Dale Carnegie of Texas to write your tagline on the front of the book. Before we get to that, I have to shout out to Dale Carnegie and his book, which written in, I think, 1934, still resonates today and is still one of the best books on life lessons, on business, on running a business, on being successful, period, to the point where I was reading in the Financial Times of the top business books of the last 20 years. One of the authors cited that book as the best business book he had ever read. So it's a message that still resonates today. And having someone in the Dale Carnegie organization write your tagline, could you tell us how that came to be and how you really see Dale Carnegie, if not sort of directly inspiring, at least influencing your writings here in 2024?
Tom, I belong to a lot of professional organizations, and I have for the last 25, 30 years. And I had attended a conference in Fort Worth, Texas, and David Wright, who's the CEO of Texas, of Dale Carnegie, gave a talk about the generational differences and about business and how it was changing. And the talk resonated so much with me because I live it every day as a recruiter. I went up to him and said, this talk was amazing. And there were a lot of people in the audience that were managers, owners, and applicants too. And I said, I just think this talk is so on target. I would love to invite you on my podcast show, Career Can Do, to do an interview about Dale Carnegie because I truly believe in what your principles are. And the Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, in my opinion, is all about relationships. Okay. Doesn't matter if you're millennial or you're a baby boomer, it's about relationships. And I think in the business world today, that's even more important. So I had let him listen to a couple of other podcasts. from Career Can Do. He agreed to be on my show. And it was a wonderful podcast. And I got so much good feedback from it. And so when I was writing my book, I said, I would be so honored if you would take a look at my book and consider writing my forward. He said, let me look at the manuscript. So he looked at the manuscript, he read it, it took a couple of weeks, he came back to me and said, yes, so much of what you have in there is in alignment with what Dale Carnegie teaches. I'll be happy to write you forward. So I think the bigger lesson here, I think, Tom, is about networking, yes, but it's about relationships. And it's about, I gave him an opportunity to be on my podcast show. He wrote my forward. So I think in life, and I know you work this way or live your life this way, it's all about, yes, what can we learn from somebody else? But more importantly, how can we contribute? How can we help that person? How can we both benefit from what we can do for each other? And I think that's an example of what happened.
So your book has stories of butterflies, dragonflies, falling on your face, and others. Tell us about how you're able to intertwine really the physical world, your personal stories, and professional inspiration to bring this book to life, Marianne.
I'm, I love to write. I'm a very creative person. But I look for the deeper meaning in everything in life. And I think sometimes, like you could probably appreciate this, Tom, when you go through a real trauma or you go through a real catastrophe in your life, you begin to see the connectedness of everything in the world. And so after I had some challenges with my husband dying and I had a few challenges with other people in my family passing away in a very short amount of time, you look around you and you see how you can draw those analogies. The butterfly story is about how a butterfly has to go through so many changes and the caterpillar. And then at the end, the next time you see a butterfly, you see the beauty of it. Think about what it had to go through to get there. Dragonflies, my sweet husband loved dragonflies, but dragonflies are all about transformation. And so I wrote a story about that. And then falling on my face, I was moving my son in graduate school and I tripped and I was carrying a big box and I fell on my face, placed down and broke all the teeth in my mouth. I lost my front tooth. And one of my clients, it was a Friday, called me and said, I need you to come here on Monday. And I didn't have a chance to tell him. And so I went. I looked like the wrath of death, but I went. And he said, oh my God, what happened? I said, I'm here. I had an accident, but what do you need? And I filled his job. I didn't worry about how I looked, but I did was relationship, service, filling the job. And he was so grateful to me for that. I've looked at all these situations, these experiences I've had, and drawn the lessons I've learned from them and tried to write about them so other people could maybe benefit from those lessons I've learned and help them navigate through changing and challenging times.
Let me ask you about one specifically that really touched or resonated with me, and that's the North Star. And we're all taught how to find the North Star as young children. If you were in the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, you were taught you could actually navigate by the North Star. Harriet Tubman, it, I would have to slip up and say immigrated, ran away from the South to the free states of the North using the North Star as her guide. So, how do you map your inner self to find your North Star? And how do you suggest people do that?
I think the North Star, which is namely called Polaris, is symbolizes constancy. And I think in life, Tom, as you'll agree with me, the only real constant in life is change. I think that when we go through change, like all of us have, especially during COVID, we have to grow and adapt to those changes, but we have to be willing to take action because of those changes to transform our life. And I think the North Star the Polaris is an example of navigating and going through times and going through where you are to get through on your journey to get to a different place. And when you go through a journey, wherever it is, maybe sometimes you're going to make some detours. You got to change your course of action. You got to change that GPS to go in a different direction. But I think the main thing is you got to keep going, and that's constancy. And so the North Star has always been very significant to me. And I wanted to write about it because I think that, especially with we've all been through with all the changes, I think we all need to navigate and look at our own North Star to find out how we're going to get to a better place, to have more fulfillment in life. And so that's why I wrote about it.
Marianne, I'd like to change the focus to your writing style. I'm always fascinated to talk to other writers about how they write, where they write, when they write. So let's go meta about your writing. Tell us about your writing style for this book.
My writing style is interesting. I have two big dogs, and in the morning I always walk my dogs. And also, I take a look at what's going on around me. And a lot of times after I walk these beautiful dogs and they go on their little journey, I come home and I sit down and I start writing. And that's where the butterfly article came from, the dragonfly article, even the blue heron. I would say my style for me is I have to do something that inspires me. And then after I have that inspiration, then I sit down and I start writing about it. The morning time for me is when I think I'm most productive. But sometimes at night, just before I go to bed, I'll review the day and maybe make some notes and then get up in the morning and start writing. So I'm a morning person. I think writing in the morning is probably most productive for me. But my writing really takes place when I'm inspired. And the hardest part time for me to write is when I've been so busy and there are a lot of challenges during the day and I've had lots of candidates that are unhappy and want to get a job and I can't find the right one. I can't write anything then. So when I'm inspired and typically by, something as weird as taking your dogs for a walk, morning time is my best time to write.
Your book is subtitled Life Lessons About Relationships, Integrity, and Contributing to the World. How did you come up with that subtitle, Mary Ann?
I came up with that subtitle because of really what made me write this book. I had during COVID somebody call me and it was a person I placed and I knew his wife because she would come to my Christmas parties and she had a friend and he was writing a book and she asked me to write um, a review on his book. So long story short, relationships were the reason that I was able to meet this person. The person that I met, I think I met him because of integrity, because of I'd been servicing this client for many years and he trusted me in my placement efforts. And then contributing to the world, I think this person really inspired me for what he does to help others and contribute to the world. So I think it was the reason the tagline is what it is because this book came about because of those things, because of the relationships I had with my client, because of a relationship a person had with a friend, because of integrity of doing my job in a way that helps others, that's for honest and true reasons, and then contributing to the world. I think that helping others, not always getting something back immediately, or yeah, sometimes not getting something back, but helping somebody else. It's about contributing to the world. I think those things are really what I'm about. And so I thought it'd be interesting to put articles in my book that reflected those things.
Do you use long form articles or other postings, LinkedIn blog posts, anything, newspaper articles as a part of your creative process for your book? Or do you just sit down and write the book?
No, I have to say, during COVID, I took many writing classes. There's a wonderful writing teacher. His name is Max Reagan. And I've taken many classes from him. His website's Holoduck Press. And I've taken many classes from him. And I think those classes during COVID did inspire me. And also the people I met on Zoom from all over the world that were authors and writers inspired me. I think my writing has come about, started out, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this podcast, as a healing journey. I had some grief, and a friend of mine said writing for healing sometimes helps you get the grief out and helps you. But then expanding that, perfecting that craft, taking classes, being with other people and learning from what they've done, how they've written. And then I read all the time. All right. I love Harvard Business Review. I love Forbes. I love Success Magazine. And reading inspires me as well. But also reflecting back on some of the experiences I've had. So I have to say my writing probably is a combination of classes and reading and hearing stories from other people and experiences that I've had in my own life that have helped me become and better and more willing to help others. Does that make any sense?
It does. Everything you say makes sense to me, Marion. So, Marion, do you think every professional needs a book, or every consulting professional, or every professional in the field we're in needs a book? Or if someone came to you and said, I'm thinking about a book, what do you think, Marianne?
No, I think a book is your calling card. I don't think a book is any claim to fame. I think it's an addition to what you do as a professional. Is it a must be or must have or must do? I don't know about that. But I think it is a way to expand your network. And I don't know if every professional needs a book, but I think writing is a good way to, if nothing else, process things for yourself. So for me, writing has been, I've always loved to write. Even when I was a little girl, I used to write in my diary. I always used to write. I think writing is a way of healing. It's a way of growing as a person. But to answer your question, does every single professional need a book? I'm not so sure about that. But I think writing is a way to get more in touch with who you are and to be able to grow and expand.
Mary Ann, the physical meeting for the first time you and I had is still one of my favorite stories. And we both had different backstories to that meeting, but it really yielded something perhaps neither one of us could have anticipated. So I want to tell our audience about that from both of our perspectives. So I'll just set it up with we were both at a National Speakers Association annual meeting in Houston. It was a keynote speech. I came in and Mary Ann was sitting at a table. And for reasons still unknown to me, I plopped down next to her. So that's the setup. Why don't you tell the audience about your journey there and what, it's meant for you since then, and then I'll fill in mine.
Okay. I almost didn't go to that conference. I've been attending the NSA conferences for many years, all over the country. And it was wonderful that it was in Houston, but it was just before COVID. Things were a little bit tight, things were a little bit down. I almost didn't go, but I remembered something that I heard Zig Ziglar say when I went to one of his training seminars for sales, that don't always tell yourself no, because you don't know, KNOW, what could come of that. And that's what happened to me for that. I thought, I don't know, but I don't really, but I thought, I don't know, who could I meet? What could I learn? So I went. And I mean, I came, you sat down next to me. We started talking. You told me what you did. I told you what I did. I had my books with me. I showed you my books. And I mean, call it serendipity if you will, but I think that something inside of me made me go to that. And tell him I feel so grateful that I was able to meet you and be on your show. And that because of that, I have my own podcast show. So I guess the message to our audience is don't tell yourself no all the time because you don't know what can come of that. And I feel so blessed that I took a chance and went to that conference, even though the timing was so off. So that's my version of the story.
Mine is really the serendipity plopped down next to you. And like I said, I still have no idea why I did. You're in sort of the back of the room. And anyway, as Marion said, we started talking. I realized immediately she would bring great value to a podcast. And so I asked her if she would come on one of my pods, and she graciously agreed to do so. I think through that process, I really was able to convince her of the power of podcasting, and that led to her fabulous show, Career Can Do, and a lot of other things. But it really shows one, literally the power of serendipity, two, how relationships, which you have no idea, we could probably not be as different than as night and day, yet we've been able to, if not co-create, inspire each other in ways that perhaps others haven't inspired us and given us both opportunities that we hadn't thought of or we didn't see before we met. We're not partners. We're not joint venture partners. We don't have anything going together yet. I still draw inspiration from what you do. And like I said, you've got a great podcast out of it that's on my network. So I can't really think of a much better result than that. But I just want people to understand exactly what Marion said. Don't say no, say, what can I know? KNOW. And if she hadn't gone and if I hadn't plopped down, we wouldn't be doing this podcast today. Like I said, I don't know anything more than just serendipity.
Yeah. And serendipity, I have to say too, I need to give a shout out to Kevin Price that owns the Price of Business show. This was also the reason I write for him is also a story in serendipity because it's somebody that introduced me to him. I met Kevin, and funny thing, Kevin is from my hometown of Detroit. So we're both Michiganders. And I start writing for Kevin, and it's been wonderful. I mean, I've really grown and expanded from that experience. I think what Tom is saying is true. Don't tell yourself no all the time because you don't know, KNOW. And my sweet dad used to always say, so what's the worst going to happen? If you fail, you're going to learn something from it. You're going to learn a lesson. And I think so many of us goes back to that thing you talked about with courage. We're afraid of fear. We're afraid of failure. But I think give it your best shot. No matter what happens, you win or lose, you're going to learn something. And who do you know you're going to meet along the way? Just like one of my favorite movies of all time is The Wizard of Oz and Dorothy, the Tin Man, and all the three people she met. And she realized that those people that she met along the way helped her become even better than before that horrible tornado.
Mary Ann, as we move towards the end of our podcast, I wanted to ask you, what's next?
Okay. I'm excited to say that I'm doing a lot more keynote speaking. That's really exciting to me. I love to speak, public speak. I also am thinking of writing more fiction. I have some ideas to write some more fiction books. And I think the other thing is I love to travel. I took a European cruise last year. And that inspired me to write when I go on a cruise and get away from the computer for a while. I think speaking and writing more and then doing workshops. If I can take my many years of expertise and help somebody else and go into a group and do that, I think that's where I want to focus in the future.
Mary Ann, before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted any more information on either topics we've touched on today, perhaps connect with you, and certainly check out your new book. Where would be the best places for them to go?
Everything is always on my website. That's faremouth.com, FAREMOUTH.com. You can also buy my books on Amazon.com. And Fairmouth and Company is my company name. Just Google Fairmouth and Company and you'll find all you need to know about me. It's on the internet all over. So those are probably the best places to connect with me.
Mary Ann, once again, it's always just a pleasure to visit with you. I can't wait till we continue this conversation. So thank you again.
Tom, it's always my pleasure. And I'm so grateful to be able to know someone like you and learn from you and to be involved with anything you do because it's always top notch. And I learn a lot from you. So thank you so much, Tom. It's my pleasure.